The title of this talk is what's on the tip of everybody's tongue, especially those that aren't from the United Kingdom. Our Queen died, leadership and non-duality. Yeah, if you want to ask questions, it's pinned to the top. It's pinned to the top of the chat. It's Lisa Cairns 12, but I'm first of all going to do an introduction, and that's on Skype. Okay. So as most of you don't know, I will just form you in that the United Kingdom, it's like in the title, we have this idea of kings and queens still in our society. A lot of European countries abolished it, but there still are quite a few that have it, like England, Denmark, I think the Netherlands, Sweden. They have these kings and queens. Our kings and queens, I don't think, have that much power, but they still do a lot of like traditional things, like when the government's turned over, you have to go and ask the Queen. Yeah, our Queen has reigned for 70 years, so most people that are currently alive in the United Kingdom were brought up with her, so it's not something you really question because she's always been there. And now the United Kingdom has a king. We were a United Queendom, but now we're actually a United Kingdom. King Charles III. Yes. And so I thought this would be an interesting discussion today about how that fits in with non-duality, like this idea of leadership and the importance of leadership and what it means to be a leader, and why the British people are so sad that the Queen died. I would say the majority, even non-royalists, are sad that the Queen died and her role in our society, and this idea of a figure and how what's that word? Figurehead, and how that relates also to gurus and what happens in India with the more traditional Advaita. And spirituality. Okay, let's go. So first of all, like always, we're going to talk about what non-duality is. So maybe you're new to these talks and you're like, yeah, what the frick is non-duality? That's why I'm here, and she's on about the English Queen. So it becomes harder to teach the longer it's been, in a way, because the further I've gone into teaching and speaking about it and deepening of this, whatever happened here, the more I see that I just have no attachment to any idea. Like, I don't care at all, one bit, if consciousness continues after death or doesn't continue after death, and if consciousness is the source of everything or if it isn't. This is like a highly debated subject in non-duality, and just turn my sound off. I'm not sure why that happened. Oops. Yeah. And so I got distracted by that now. So yeah, I don't care about these different arguments, but there is a tradition in the ways that it's taught, and it's relevant in the depicting of who you believe yourself to be. So when you initially get into non-duality, you've been totally, most of the time, totally invested in the world. So you really believe that you are you are real, you are separate from other people, and you are separate from the world, and you exist as an independent entity that's on this planet, that you're born, and that maybe when you die you go to something called heaven, or maybe you're an atheist and just believe it's like nothingness. And so this is where like the more traditional consciousness teachings come into play, because you come into this subject with this predisposition and a belief system of who you are and what you are. So most people walking around this planet believe they are their name, their identity, their job, their career, their thoughts, their beliefs. Like when I taught, I think I've spoken about this before in my online sessions, like when I taught in the NHS, so that's the National Health Care System of England, I somehow ended up doing a session there. They thought it was mindfulness, and I went in and said to them, I tried to explain to them that their anger towards the healthcare system, yeah, that's a bit complicated. I was working within this carer section, yeah. So their anger towards the healthcare system and the disappointment and the letdown that they feel like they've experienced is a thought. This did not go down well. I nearly got like stoned, literally, or headbutted or spat at or thrown a drink at. This didn't go down well. Luckily, my friend was there and was able to rescue me, because they didn't realize that they thought. That's so weird, eh? So they obviously realize that they're like calculating something and thinking, but when they're angry, say with the NHS or with something, they don't realize that that is a thought that's happening. They believe that that's actually something that's happening outside in the world, and they can't see that they're having these thoughts or ideas about it. They see it as something that's real. So the NHS has wronged them. And that's that. It's not like, oh, this is a thought, or this is what I'm thinking, or this is what I'm feeling. It's like, that is what's happened. That is the truth of the situation. Because I got into the subject so young, I can't remember that. This is sometimes where, like, I feel like it's hard for me to teach, because I cannot remember that experience where I really believed my thoughts, that my anger, it wasn't even justified. It was real. They were a bad person. They had done me wrong. So, yeah, it's really something, eh? So when I said to them, it's a thought, like they were just so offended, and I couldn't work that out. So my friend then explained that we have thoughts to them, and we have thoughts, and one thought might say this is good, and they were really basic, and it worked. They actually kind of got into it. But most people, when they get into this subject, they are like that. We forget because we've been in this subject so long. But they really, and so some people here might be like that, that you experience something and you believe that that experience is real. I've told people recently that I talked with a neuroscientist in England. I did an interview with him. It was super beautiful. And, you know, one thing that he was saying that was important was that, you know, through examining the brain, he began to realize that nothing that he thought or felt or experienced was real. And I think that somebody that studies the brain and has that realization could have an awakening with no knowledge of consciousness or non-duality. There could be an energetic awakening, because that is so deep and so profound that nothing that you think, feel, experience is real. Even the idea of real or false or true or not truth isn't real. So even that isn't real, like it's all projection. So there is a simulation happening, and there's nothing wrong with saying you feel like that and that's your current experience, but it isn't real, and that's the fundamental point. So when you're teaching non-duality, having this teaching of consciousness, it kind of gives people a basis. So traditionally in consciousness, it would be taught that, so there is this simulation of the body-mind, and there is something beyond the body-mind watching it, and that is who you are. And that's really beautiful. Like with the fact that I don't believe in it one way or the other, because you go so deep that it all becomes irrelevant, that actual sentence and that actual teaching is really beautiful when you think about it. So when you come to this talk, you believe you and the world are real. And then non-duality is questioning that. And the way I think it makes it palatable to people, and it kind of gives them hope, which in the end has to be let go of, but that hope along the process is important because it stops you falling off the cliff into suicidal nihilism or something, is that there is this big consciousness, which you could call God, that's experiencing that person. And you can kind of like see this without having an energetic expansion. There can be some form of knowing this, that there is this simulation of a person. You could look at it like virtual reality. Like virtual reality, it's like you put on these goggles. So consciousness puts on these goggles of this character, Lisa, and then experiences this virtual world through this avatar called Lisa. But there is something watching that is pure and free. So there's something watching through that. And that watching is the truth. I kind of love that and love that teaching. But experientially, it becomes redundant after a while. And what happens is there is an awakening and there is this presence, and you really don't care too much about the way you conceptualize it. There is this presence, and what you are is what's happening, is life itself, is this. And like the definition of consciousness or nothing or everything or God or love or all these things is like semantics. They create nice experiences. So when I hear people talking about like love and love is everything, like my heart is like, oh yeah, baby. Whereas when someone's like, yeah, hate is everything, everything is hate, the world is shit, I'm like, oh. So non-duality is, to me, an energetic awakening. You seemingly go through a process of detaching from the person. So detaching from everything you thought yourself to be and everything you think you're the other to be. And the world to be. So there is a detaching from that. And the way that it'd be taught in non-duality is there's a coming back more to this stillness. And at some point, so what I predominantly talk about is that there is this energetic shift that's beyond all knowledge. And it's kind of happening all the time. Like, so you're kind of like expanding and then contracting, expanding and contracting. And at some point it just switches over. So who you are, your fundamental sense of being, becomes what's actually happening and not your image of what's happening or all your sensory perceptions of what's happening and the interpretation of it. So like your daydreams about what's happening, your interpretations, your illusions, so the pleasure of the body or something isn't who you are. Who you are is this moment, is this radical alive moment which never leaves. Now, the reason that a lot of people teach consciousness is because consciousness is never separate from this moment, and that's why it's so ingenious. So, like, you cannot have this moment without there being a conscious recognition of it. And that consciousness recognition, I mean, this is really ingenious, this teaching. The conscious recognition, so this knowing that it's happening, isn't separate from all things that are happening. So consciousness isn't something that's happening in the body. It's not like there's consciousness and there's the world there. When you have this energetic shift, it begins to be seen, or it doesn't even begin to, it just becomes radically obvious that the looking isn't separate from what's happening. But you can't really separate it out. So to say everything is consciousness, I mean, yeah, it's like beautiful, that teaching. I'm sorry, I got a little bit distracted there because there was a really weird sound in the house. I thought a bird had got in. And so I might have just suddenly not made sense. I don't know if you saw me, like suddenly look around. So yeah, I was just in a really complex bit of teaching and then suddenly the mind got distracted. So what we are, though, this is the fundamental part, is what's happening, and you cannot separate out the looking from what's happening. But it's not like who you are is this consciousness that's separate from the world. So, and it's not like this consciousness can be found by the personal awareness. The personal awareness is part of it. So the personal awareness is like a part of it, and a part of it cannot hold on to it, because what we're talking about is everything here. Everything. Yeah, I really don't speak for beginners. If you find that I'm just like talking googly glab for you, what you can do is you can just keep watching the videos and you'll get used to my language, or you can maybe try someone like Eckhart Tolle first to help bridge that gap. Eckhart Tolle, and then maybe Rupert Spira or Gangaji. And it might help bridge it a little. Yeah. So what you are is what is. And everything that anyone says to you is a teaching that isn't it. It's something that comes and goes, but there's relevance in it. You don't have to like toss the baby out with the bathwater. That's such a great saying, because it's de-picking what you think you know. Like, it kind of, when you know the energetic shift hasn't happened, a really great practice that you can do is the personal awareness can keep putting its attention back into this moment or consciousness, because it's settling for that person. It's like anchoring. I remember, when I was in deep suffering, I would hold on to the consciousness, the sense of I am. The I am is the beingness, is the love side. It's kind of not separate from consciousness, but it's a sense of existence. And I would like hold on to it, and when something shitty was happening, I would hold on to that, which is really beautiful, because it's kind of like teaching you to come back to the visceral experience rather than your interpretation of what's being experienced. There's times and places to go into your ideas about what's happening and your beliefs, and to decondition that, but the actual practice of moving back to presence is super beautiful. So that is a summary of what non-duality is, but it's quite like I just go straight off the cliff like the lemons, like into non-duality. So I've given you some other teachers you can look at. So now, like the importance of leadership and non-duality. So a lot of people, including myself, when I got into this subject, I felt like if everybody had an awakening, then we would be in a completely peaceful society. I do think if everyone had an awakening, there would be a revolution. But there'll still be conflict, because all the different fractions of society will more than likely still group together and think that their ideas are better in some way. Like, so for myself, if I have a belief in vegetarianism and veganism, I know it's not the way, and I know it's not for everyone, and it's not right. There is a flow here that wants to not hurt animals, but I also know that it's not right. But it doesn't mean that after awakening everyone's going to become vegetarians and vegans. So if we had this awakening, it doesn't mean that everyone's just going to implicitly get on, because there'll be other people that want to still eat animals. It doesn't mean that we will argue about it, but there's going to be all these different fractions, so everyone will have different ideas about the way society should be led and who should lead society. So then it comes into like leaderships and gurus. So in non-duality, traditionally the way that it was taught was through a guru. So you had a guru that you went to, so this like queen-like figure in a way, and you learnt it word to mouth, word of mouth. Oh, I don't know how you say that saying. So you learnt it verbally. And I can see the importance of that, because what I notice with people that I work with is that when they're working with me, they listen to what I say, but I think that when they go off and they're on their own, they do their own thing. So I'll give an example, is that often awakening comes with calming down the ego or the person or the sense of self. So it comes with becoming a more balanced sense of self. So I went through that. I had a teacher, and I went through a process of like having my delusions pointed out to me. So I thought something was real, like I was angry with someone and I thought it was real, and I would have that pointed out to not be true, which is a very delicate thing. And the great thing about having a teacher was that they were always there pointing it out. If I was just doing like 1 hour a week with that person, which I think is great and beneficial, then it most probably would have been a lot slower, because there was lots of illusions during the week that I was going into. And so having that person point out that that's not true, that that's illusion. And these illusions are so deep sometimes of what we believe in that we don't even know it's happening. I'm not saying that you have to get to the bottom of everything you believe in, but at some point, you know, like so much is cleared away and the person's calmed down, a shift happens. And then the body will have predispositions towards beliefs, but it's like got a difference to it. Like there is a deep knowing that what is truly real is what is, and everything else is subjective. And it's an energetic shift. But prior to that, there is a de-picking of things, and it can be very disturbing. It can create a lot of anguish in the person, but through time it can create a better life, a more healthy person. So traditionally you had a teacher, and then the teacher would point out these things, but that creates lots of difficulties because you've got this like higher lower dynamic, and you've got the teacher that's all-knowing and the student that isn't all-knowing. So there is then difficulties, and what if you disagree with the teacher, and the teacher's not going to be perfect, so they're going to create problems and do things that are maybe unethical at points, because nobody is perfect. So this is a really interesting dynamic. It seems to me that humans are really drawn to having a leader and having a teacher, even if there is a rebellion against it. Like I can be a bit rebellious against teachers. I can feel inside of me, and maybe you can too, is that there is a drawing to looking up to people and respecting people and to being led. And I think that that's a very natural human condition, because that's how we've survived in communities. We've had leaders in our communities for a very long time. I don't even want to put how many thousands of years on that. So, you know, what is a good leader is somebody that's awakening and had the energetic shift. A good leader, like, is it them that should be the next queen or the next king of a society or a next leader of a society? And I would say no. I don't think that awakening necessarily makes you a good leader, because you don't know how that body's programmed. So that body might be programmed towards the accumulation of power, and that might not necessarily go in awakening. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. But most probably what you need to look for in a leader is somebody that's not drawn to the power side of things, I would suspect, but I can't be right. If they're not drawn to the power side of things, they most probably don't want to do it. But that's most probably a good leader. And that's interestingly what happened with the Queen. From my understanding of it, she did not want to be a queen. Like I hear often that they don't actually want to take on the role, and they see it as a bit of a burden. And she did do some great things, even though I don't like the tradition of monarchy. I think it was important in our last, an older society, but I think it's something that can be let go of now. I think that she did do some things well, that there was an objectivity to it. And also being a role model for women in a time when there was immense change for women, that women can actually work and be the boss and be the ruler as well. Yeah. And so Boris Johnson would be the polar opposite. It's quite evident that he leads through a desire for power. You can kind of feel that. Like he's trying to bring things in for himself. And when there's no awakening there and you're doing that, it's like, but I think that you can have awakening and there can still be that predisposition. I used to think and love the idea that awakening happened and the person came out perfect. But I think that this is an idea that arises with this idea of a king and king. It's like a king or a queen. It's like the dream to idolize someone, like this perfect idol. I think it's a lack. I think it's faulty to believe that anybody is perfect. So with the queen, something that worked really well of her being a figurehead was that she showed very little personality. And what that means is personal stuff. She never did interviews. She didn't give her opinion. So she wasn't divisive in any way. She was a figurehead and she did things. And the things that she did could be divisive, like she went and shook hands with the IRA, when we were in the peace agreement with Ireland. So things she did could be divisive, but she never in herself was expressively divisive. But she will have had personalities. I'm sure she had periods of depression and sadness. I'm sure she's had anger. She's been unfair. She's been hypocritical. She's been selfish. She's been greedy. I'm sure she's also been kind and loving and sweet, because that is what we're like, awakening or no awakening. Like, human isn't perfect. And to have this idolization onto something that it's perfect tends to be coming from an illusion in yourself. Like it's like a safety. There is a perfect person out there that I can rely on. The Queen was a perfect person that our society can rely on. We did kind of have her like that. It's like she was always opinionless and was in there no matter what. It's kind of like the ultimate mother. But it's not realistic. I think that bad things happen when people believe this. You can see it in these kind of gurus, these Western gurus with big organizations. It's like they're painted as like this perfect person that never has anything negative. So then it's what in you needs that. What in you needs to look up to the other person. It's like maybe it's also a part of like trying to find that in you. And there is a perfectness in you, in everybody, but it's not in action, it's in this moment. When we go into time and thoughts and actions, it's always like good and bad. Good and bad. So the perfection that you look for in your idol, in the Queen, in anyone, really is the perfection of this moment. That is your Savior, that is Jesus Christ, that is the King, the Queen, everything, the perfect mother, the perfect father, your perfect lover. So how to have a more disastrous relationship than to believe that your partner should be perfect or is perfect. Because if you have that idea, you're not allowing them to be who they are, which is all kinds of things. If you've got the idea that your partner is perfect, you need to go and ask them to do a enormous fart in front of you. Or to ask them their most embarrassing secret or nastiest thing they've done or something. Okay, so let's go to questions. So if you want to ask a question, you can do on Skype, which is Lisa Cairns 12. Yeah, I have some questions in there. Or you can do also in the YouTube chat. But if you do in the YouTube chat, can you put questions so I can find it easier? So question ... and then write your question. And then the other way is Lisa Cairns 12 Skype address.